Let's get rolling. So I am Len DiCostanzo, CEO here at MSP Toolkit. I've been working real hard and long to build out this MSP Accelerator workshop, mastering SaaS management, best practices for MSPs. And for any of you out there that know me, and certainly hopefully I can share with the new folks joining today, I've been an MSP and I've been coaching MSPs for quite a long time, as well as working with vendors, helping them go to market with MSPs. And today, it's all about SaaS management and how to regain control of your client SaaS ecosystems while generating revenue and also delivering better outcomes for your client. So I wanted to kind of give a quick intro to myself. I was an MSP, in fact, an early adopter of the MSP model in the late 90s. I went from break fix to managed services, built my MSP Accelerator program based on that experience, and ultimately coached thousands of MSPs around the world as I built partner communities for top and emerging vendors like Kaseya, Autotask, worked with Datto after our merger, and I've been consulting with vendors over the last 6 years, clients like ConnectWise, building out the ConnectWise partner program for cybersecurity, LastPass, Coro, a lot of the top vendors out there, and actually recently joined Afire as a co-founder, where we are building a SaaS management platform for MSPs. And that's really given me an opportunity to go deeper in my conversations with MSPs, over 100 conversations, focus groups, just hallway conversations at the various conferences, and really just digging into the SaaS management problem that I tried to solve, as Rich mentioned over in our Autotask days, with billing reconciliation being an issue for MSPs, and then on through my time at Accorda, where we built the first the first SaaS management platform for MSPs back in 2019, 2020. And I kind of think we sold a little early, and when I ran into the team at Afire, Giannis, Elvira, now Dimitri, and Carlos, I realized I had an opportunity to kind of get back in and build a world-class SaaS management platform for MSPs. And here I'm going to share some best practices in mastering SaaS management. And we're going to start out by looking at the market opportunity and the risk that's present with that market opportunity. And that's always a best practice. Know what you're getting into so that you can then build a focus. And in this case, we're going to build a SaaS management practice. And a couple of months back, with the advent of AI, built a workshop around building your AI practice. So every time the industry evolves, new technology comes, really look to focus and build a practice around it so that you're not doing it for the first time all the time. And then we're going to talk about best practices for discovering client SaaS apps in use. We're going to talk about SaaS sprawl and all the issues that it presents, and get into developing a baseline SaaS catalog so that you know what your client has in their environment and how to support it, and how to add new SaaS apps into that baseline catalog. And we're going to talk about developing security, license management, and adoption services. These are key for your ongoing managed services. Once you get through developing that baseline catalog, now you want to develop some managed services around the SaaS that you've discovered and you're managing for your clients. And then I'll leave you with some SaaS management kind of talk tracks, conversation points you can have with your clients as you're building out your SaaS management practice, selling to your clients first. And we should have room for questions, and I'll leave you with some next steps. And as you can see, we got a question box for you. So that's great. You can hear me loud and clear. Pop some questions in as we move along. Rich and the team will be back there looking to see what's up. I do want to welcome Afire, joining me on this webinar and being a part of the Afire team. And we're going to kind of touch on where Afire fits through all of this, and hopefully get you guys interested in working with Afire. So first, I want to share some insights on the market opportunity for SaaS management, because really that's what gives us this opportunity. And that's, there's a lot of SaaS out there. And if you just look at SaaS portfolio size and spend, companies 1 to 500 employees have over 150 SaaS apps. Now, many of you might be focusing in the SMB, maybe sub 100 users. And clearly in my conversations, I've seen, 50 or more SaaS apps in smaller businesses, over 13 apps per user, thousands of app connections, down even in the small, medium business size. But this is from the Xylo Enterprise SaaS Management Index report, where you can see tons of SaaS apps in use across 500 employees, and annual spend $11.5 million. In fact, Canalys talks about $420 billion globally being delivered in the SaaS industry. And that's not just SaaS apps, but service spend around those SaaS apps, which I think squarely fits in to what you're trying to do as an MSP. So small business spends big on SaaS, another great stat for MSPs. Why? You're focused in the SMB space. And what you can see here is small and medium businesses are spending over $7,200 annually per employee on SaaS. Now, enterprise is a little lower, maybe because the controls have been put in place in the enterprise that we're now trying to bring down into the MSP market. And that 7,200 plus of spend is good for MSPs. I mean, do you even know your client's average spend? You may not even be aware of some of the SaaS that is used by your clients if you did not sell it. And I think one of the key stats for me here is you've heard Microsoft, Salesforce, various vendors talk about for every dollar of SaaS sold, there's anywhere from $4 to $7, $8 of services wrapped around that SaaS spend. Clearly in your wheelhouse as an MSP and creating value in your businesses, building services on top of SaaS, on top of technology. And really, I think that's a big takeaway right here is big spend on SaaS means big spend on services. And this graph, this chart is real important. Business units and shadow SaaS are accounting for almost 85% of SaaS apps inside a business organization. And if you look at the number of apps, almost 85% being brought in by business units and shadow IT. Now, shadow IT we're going to talk about may not necessarily be bad, but it typically is, it says shadow IT. I like to call it shadow SaaS. But if you're not aware of SaaS apps going on, being used in your client base, that's a big problem. And if 50% are being brought in by business units, are you working with business units inside your client base? A lot of times you get stuck working on infrastructure, maybe just with an owner, maybe the CFO, and really no matter how small your client is or how large, you have to get entangled in those business units who now, because of the ease of use with SaaS, ease of sign up, are bringing SaaS apps into the business. And I think what's really key here, I like to look right here at the 15.9% that IT is bringing in terms of SaaS. If you look at that as you, the MSP, you may be bringing in your Microsoft Office, maybe you're bringing in a CRM, maybe you're bringing in, some SaaS apps that you've built a practice around, but you're typically seeing IT now only bringing in 16% of SaaS apps. What are you bringing in as an MSP? And are you aware of the other 85% of SaaS apps being used in your client base? Again, a huge opportunity for you to kind of regain control and some revenue. Because ultimately this SaaS sprawl creates complexity and risk, right? There's lots of opportunity when there's mystery. And really, based on my conversations, either MSPs are not aware of the complexity and risk created by SaaS, folks aren't necessarily looking at it. And then there are other mature MSPs that are already looking into SaaS management and trying to regain control. And I've been around long enough to know back in the day, and certainly with your RMM as an MSP, you always knew what software was being used by your clients, typically very high percentage. You rolled it out, you configured it, you helped procure it, perhaps even you sold it. And what happened is that SaaS just became easy to use, and users now just sign up and start using SaaS, and you as the MSP supporting your client as the IT department are not aware of it. Things like shadow SaaS, again, increasing attack surface, misconfigurations, not only misconfigurations on integrations, but perhaps making everybody a super admin or multiple super admins, giving folks access to data, because if it's brought in by a business unit or by a user, they may not even know what they're doing. Bottom line, misconfigurations, things like that leading to data loss. And The big risk that you're seeing a lot out there now is financial risk. Clients spending money on SaaS they're not using, spending money on licenses too big for them, and really not even adopting the product that they've just purchased. So a lot of opportunity, however, in this complexity and risk, and that's really what we're talking about today with you as the MSP, because the time is now to deliver SaaS management services. And you're seeing it at the enterprise level, and as usually happens, it's now coming down into the SMB, into the MSP space. And are you doing SaaS management for your clients and covering your client and your SaaS? And here I want to bring up the Gartner Magic Quadrant for SaaS management platforms. I mentioned we built the first SaaS management platform for MSPs at Accorda back in 2019, 2020. Gartner had a market guide for SaaS management. Now they've officially launched the Magic Quadrant for SaaS management platforms, which really just shows that it's happening and it's now. And one of the key findings through 2027, organizations that fail to centrally manage SaaS lifecycles will remain 5 times more susceptible to a cyber incident or data loss due to incomplete visibility into SaaS usage and configuration. And there's already risk out there for you and your clients. Why add to it? And let's talk about regaining control of your client SaaS ecosystem. And the way I like to do it, I've been talking about practice building for a long time, and now I want to talk about building your SaaS management practice, focusing around, building your service catalog, your professional and managed services, and other key practice elements that give you a focus on delivering good SaaS management services. So one other key stat, Gartner, we talked about Canalys and the number of the billions of dollars in the SaaS world. Gartner is talking about SaaS market value being 1.23 trillion by 2032. Now these numbers, billions, I don't know about you, but just hard to comprehend. So I always focus my MSP clients and others, what is the opportunity in your client base? If you just take that 7,000 per user spend per year, and you take a look at the 4 to 7, 8 times multiple you hear vendors talk about in terms of service on top of their SaaS product, you can develop your own TAM for your client base. And really, that's where you're going to focus first. So why not take a look at what the opportunity is in your client base? And we're going to talk about that in managed services in a second. And you want to build a SaaS management practice to take advantage of that opportunity, removing blind spots and regaining that visibility you may have lost in that manageability of your client SaaS ecosystems, which ultimately, gives you a chance to mitigate those financial and security risks we touched on. And it really comes down to protecting your client base. We know how much easier it is to sell to your clients as opposed to picking up new business. And some of you are probably like myself, you had clients for years and decades, and now what you're looking at here is you need to find and resolve issues before your client or the competition does. Your pure MSP, some of them, the mature ones, are starting to get into SaaS management. They may come in, do an assessment, and start telling your client that they've got unused licenses they're paying for, or they're not really adopting the products that maybe you've sold them or that are in their client base. And your clients probably think you're managing all the SaaS for them anyway. So again, protecting your client base and retention, really key result of you building your SaaS management practice. And we touched on some professional services earlier, but you really want to think about those professional services from executing SaaS management projects. We're going to talk about a baseline project as you work in your client base, and perhaps even as you pick up new clients, you want to go in and do a SaaS audit, a SaaS assessment around this baseline project. And you want to add SaaS managed services, incremental revenue, driving your MRR, an average revenue per user. Once you do your baseline project, now you have a license kind of to start monitoring and managing all SaaS used. And as you're managing that SaaS, you're going to find some pull-through projects, professional service opportunities, such as driving adoption through training and consulting, and perhaps integrating with SaaS apps with other approved or compliant SaaS applications. So a couple of key reasons why you want to build your SaaS management practice. And what is practice building? Well, practice building is about expanding revenue opportunity. And most MSPs started out in the infrastructure world, and kind of makes it tough sometimes to move outside that infrastructure world. But you have to these days, as technology becomes more easy and more reliable. You have to start expanding your business around different service opportunities. And I often see MSPs do free assessments, give a proposal, and then their client goes and a prospect goes and shops it around. I talk about doing a fee-based type of assessment, and you might be good enough that you can even call it an RFP to your client or your prospect. But ultimately, you drive a project around infrastructure. We figured out what managed services is with our RMM, our PSA ticketing system, our BCDR, and we went from break fix, fixing broken stuff in our deployed project, to monitoring and managing and building our managed service practice. We then got all excited about cybersecurity. What was that project that you deployed to implement new cybersecurity solutions in your client base? And you figured out what recurring revenue you're going to bolt on to that. Mentioned building an AI workshop. What's the project around deploying AI in your client base, and what are those managed services you're going to bolt onto that project, that infrastructure, the SaaS, and the products that go into it? Now we're talking about a SaaS management practice, developing our baseline project, our assessment service that's going to result in a baseline catalog, and then ultimately bolting on SaaS managed services. We're going to touch on subscription management, security right here. This is where we're going to look at today, and obviously also looking here at our project. What I always want to caution is, you see this little SaaS line down here, and you definitely just don't want to get caught up reselling SaaS. Always make sure you're building managed services on top of your SaaS. I hear a lot of MSPs say they're an MSP. The reality is they have not built services on top of SaaS used by their clients or that they've sold. And I remember when some of our clients, our MSPs back with the Cordo Cloud Optimizer, just didn't understand how to monetize beyond the Office 365 licenses, and kind of not being happy with the 4 to 8% they were given through distribution on the Microsoft license. So again, practice building is key, building your project and your managed services around it. And what we're looking at here are your professional services that you're going to build. And one of the key things around these professional services is, how do you learn about what type of services? Well, I've given you a little framework here, but bottom line is, you want to develop repeatable professional services. It typically means deploy SaaS management in your own business first. Do your discovery and develop your catalog, your baseline catalog. You're going to do it for your clients and your prospects. Learn how long it takes to deliver that service or execute on that service. What does it take to onboard a SaaS app? Set up role-based user management. Integrate with different systems inside your client's business. What kind of automations can you create? What kind of training services? So a lot of repeatable services that start with building your baseline catalog that ultimately become services you can deliver as you implement your SaaS management lifecycle. And when you put these repeatable pro services together, there's your baseline project that you can go out and execute, generate revenue, and then ultimately move into your managed service offerings. And one of the key things I just want to point out, integrations, it's a real opportunity and it's a real risk, especially if end users are setting up those integrations, perhaps with non-compliant SaaS apps. So just kind of keep it in mind that there's a bunch of repeatable pro services that you can execute and to generate revenue. And here we have our SaaS managed service bundle. We're talking about developing your license and security and adoption services, your monitoring services. If you think about what you do with your RMM, and you've built, like I often say, you cannot be an MSP without an RMM, certainly a traditional MSP, because you're working on infrastructure. You monitor and manage it. RMM, remote monitoring and management of assets. And somehow we lost control of software because of SaaS and being so easy to use. So ultimately define your managed services. And we talked about the market opportunity. How many users do you manage right now? How many users are under management? And just as I said on the pro services side, What kind of eyeballs time are you putting on dashboards, on tickets? And ultimately, there are some hard costs in there, like maybe a SaaS management platform license or the SaaS license. Bottom line, come up with a cost per user and what you're going to sell your managed services for and add on to your standard bundle. I think the days of having multiple bundles are gone. You've got to go in and say, hey, Mr. Client or prospect, here are the managed services that we need to execute to support your environment. So as you build out your SaaS managed service bundle, think about those repeatable services. We're going to touch on them as we move through the session, but understand the type of revenue you can generate in your client base if you build out the SaaS management practice. So, understand your costs and plan your profits for SaaS managed services from continuously monitoring these SaaS ecosystems. So as you're kind of getting your baseline set up and now kind of everything is set up, the real key is, what is your SaaS management life cycle? And you see our nice little green box here, right? That's kind of what starts it off. And I think that's something you can still give to the end user here. Like, we're talking about a user requesting a SaaS app, but we know in today's world, a lot of research being done online. So you may not be in on the first go round when your client or a user starts looking for SaaS app. But if you built a baseline catalog, if you've informed the users at your client what SaaS apps are available, maybe you set up a marketplace after you do discovery, and your end users start their research and see, oh, do we already have a project management tool or a CRM tool or a project or whatever tool you might have, and then they can maybe request access to it, right? And now you're controlling that. Or maybe they're going to go in and start the process, and part of your process is letting your end user find and feel like they have a hand in finding the SaaS app. But ultimately, you want to make sure you have a service request process, a new SaaS request capability, just like you have with everything else as an MSP. Opening tickets, end users make a request, and you respond to it. And then ultimately, you come in, perhaps at the making a decision and ultimately onboarding that software and running through integrations and configurations and making sure that that software, that SaaS, is implemented properly. And once it's implemented, now you're delivering your managed services. We're going to touch on that specifically in a second. And I really want to bring up support and incident management, right? One of the things I still am haunted by back in my days as an MSP is having an end user not know that we were supporting them and they had an issue and they called up a software vendor. In fact, it was a hardware vendor back in the server room, and that vendor said, oh, you're having a problem, let me send one of my partners over to help you. Now, since they didn't know it was me and it was in my area, boom, I had competition inside my account. So I always implore MSPs, take that first call, not only for SaaS, but for anything. Why? Well, you're going to learn the issues, you're going to learn how to resolve the basic issues, and then you will be the ultimate connection into that SaaS vendor, into that vendor, to find the answer for your end user. So now you're collecting all the support tickets around each of the pieces of technology in your client business and kind of keep a little control in there. And then ultimately, you're always going to be looking to optimize and improve the way that SaaS is operating in your client's business. And then continuing on, your life cycle has to have offboarding and deprovisioning. We're going to see a stat in a second on how that can be an issue, and how do you finally get rid of that SaaS app out of the business. So define your SaaS management lifecycle, key best practice as you build out your SaaS management practice. One of the other key best practices is to develop a SaaS acceptable use policy. Again, been around long enough to remember when email first came out. You had to have an email acceptable use policy, an internet acceptable use policy, AI acceptable use policy. Now we got to talk about a customizable SaaS acceptable use policy based on your client. You can easily create a template. Certainly, I'll share. Definitely looking at how AI can help. Copilot did a great job helping me here, guys. But ultimately, acceptable use starts with authorized account access. And one of the key things is, what is an authorized user? Is it a user with a company email that was defined in Microsoft or in Google? Yes, that's a great way to start. Perhaps standardizing on browsers, very important, right? You have one browser or multiple browsers or any browser. How can you lock that down? What's the approval process, right? We talked earlier about selecting a SaaS app. How does that process work? Define it, automate it, and make it easy for end users still to get into a SaaS app that works for them. And make sure they know you have the right to monitor usage. It is a company asset, and you do want to make sure that your users are aware, because sometimes they might want to log in with a personal email to a company app that they're deploying or forgetting that they've done that. So again, SaaS acceptable use policy, very important. And one of the things that really, as mentioned by the SaaS Magic Quadrant by Gartner, SaaS management platforms, or SMPs, are coming into form right now, not only in the enterprise, but certainly in the MSP space. Again, another stat in the Gartner Magic Quadrant white paper, through 2027, organizations that fail to attain centralized visibility and coordinate SaaS life cycles will overspend on SaaS by at least 25% due to unused entitlements and overlapping and unnecessary tools. So Gartner is seeing the trend, we're seeing the trend, and ultimately you need a SaaS management platform. That's kind of where a fire pops in, giving you that ability to discover all SaaS in use, enrich that data that you discover via API connections into those SaaS apps, produce that centralized catalog, and start to have elevated conversations with your client where you're starting to identify things like redundant apps or licenses that aren't being used, maybe MFA not turned on, and then you want to automate and orchestrate across your client base so that you don't have to log in to multiple portals or multiple apps. And really, I don't think the holy grail of one SMP is here yet. You could see one MSP CTO we spoke with has 20 tools that they have to go to. So having a single place to go is the ultimate goal. You may find yourself using multiple tools. A fire's not there yet either, but we're going to do a great job discovering and enriching that data, helping you produce that SaaS catalog and give you that opportunity for elevated conversations and eliminating blind spots. As you can see here, very important across your client base, aggregate dashboards letting you see what's going on in terms of alerts security-wise in your client base. Maybe they're signing up for new shadow SaaS, but ultimately giving you that chance to identify revenue opportunities. And I think that's where SaaS management platforms are going to head to, where you're going to have one. And I hark back to my Autotask days when we tried combining CRM, project management, billing, ticketing in one application, and it took probably good 2-3 years that I was there, 2008, 9, 10, before now we know PSA is pretty standard, but for a while there, putting everything under one roof, people didn't quite see that. That's what you're going to see with a SaaS management platform. That's what you see with the SASE framework Gartner talks about. Ultimately, these individual point solutions have got to be combined and simplify management, and here, simplify management of your client SaaS ecosystems. So it all gets started here, and actually, I definitely wanted to share a poll question here with you guys, and now that we've talked a little bit about it, but I want to know, has SaaS sprawl created complexity and risks for you as you support your clients? I think that it's real important. I definitely want to understand what you guys are feeling out there, and if you're experiencing SaaS sprawl, you need to regain control, right? It's created complexity and risk. You want to regain control. Are you in the process of regaining control? No, you already have it under control. Maybe you're not experiencing that complexity and risk. And certainly in my conversations, I have certainly seen that. I like that. We're getting some great responses in here. But I think the key here is, are you seeing the complexity and risk? I've spoken to MSPs maybe who are smaller, maybe less mature. They don't really understand the risk. Maybe larger MSPs just, maybe the size and scope of getting your arms around it is kind of tough. And let's see if I can get a couple more answers in here, folks. I really like to see engagement here, and I think we're going to close this poll and let's kind of share the results here. And what you see is very interesting, right? Yes, we need to regain control. So folks are seeing it. Yes, and they're in a process of regaining control. Don't see anybody that has it under control and no one that's not experiencing it. So I think that's a really telling stat and relevant for today's topic. So let's now jump in and talk about discovering your client SaaS ecosystem and really getting into that baseline catalog we've been talking about. So discovery really gets your baseline project started. Now with a fire, we're using browser extension, moving into agent, connection to financial systems. So what you're seeing here are all the different ways you can do discovery. And once you discover SaaS, like interestingly, I've spoken to many MSPs who are using Excel, and really it doesn't matter what you're using to get started. Just get started gathering the SaaS apps, whether you're sending an email and asking end users what they're using and try to wrap your arms around it that way. Maybe you're looking at your client financial systems, but just really get that data in one place and start to normalize it. You know, maybe you want to rate the SaaS apps. Who's the business unit, or what business unit brought it in? Who's the owner? Who is supporting that SaaS app? Again, I say it should be you. Is it an approved app or an unapproved app? And once you really get that down, you can now start to execute on identifying security risks. Here you see a pretty incredible stat. Former employees from 31% of companies have accessed company assets stored in SaaS after they've left the company. Think about it. Poor offboarding has created a security risk. So get in there. Assess the security posture of the discovered SaaS. What's the configurations look like? Is MFA available or even turned on? What are the roles defined? And identify those vulnerabilities around shadow SaaS and compliance, and implement security measures as you work to get to that baseline service or SaaS catalog. ID license and spend risk, really critical here. Companies are wasting money on unused licenses. On average, utilization sits at 47%. 4% decrease year over year, but companies are not using 52% of the licenses they purchased. Now that number is big, maybe on the enterprise side as people leave and poor offboarding, but bottom line is you're going to see it in your environment. So you want to start to identify redundant, underutilized apps. As you discover, you may see multiple CRMs, multiple project management tools. Maybe you're going to learn contract terms at this point because you're starting to see SaaS apps. Maybe your client's aware of some of these SaaS apps that you're not, and you didn't learn about when you brought your client on. So begin to recommend cost-saving measures as you identify these apps, number of licenses, and really eliminate unnecessary applications. Adoption. Key reasons for customer churn include poor onboarding, lack of product adoption, and inadequate customer support. So really here is where you reduce churn, minimize churn, and teach your clients how to use those SaaS apps. I remember quoting training many times in my day, building solutions for my clients. And one of the first things they would eliminate is training. And I would say, you cannot. How are you going to see ROI on your investment? Same thing with SaaS apps. And ultimately, as you build your baseline catalog, and understand SaaS usage, you're going to really look to present a plan to drive adoption and ROI for your client. One other point that I've noticed is a lot of vendors are actually rewarding their partners and driving incentives for adoption. Because I remember stats from Microsoft at 15 and 40% adoption, certainly at 40%, you kind of feel like that app is there to stay, and that's good for you. And ultimately, as you build your baseline, do your discovery, identify security risks, license and adoption and ROI risks, you're going to have those strategic conversations. Again, redundant apps, license and spend, security risks, and build your SaaS catalog. Very important there. And ultimately now, you want to monitor and manage license security and adoption, and kind of maintain that baseline catalog. So discovery gets you started, gets you really into your next step, your managed services, security license management, and adoption services to maintain your SaaS baseline catalog. And I mentioned earlier, one of the key features that we built in our product at Accordo was a security template. And I see some folks doing that today. Build your security template. You know how you want your client SaaS to be set up, right? So monitor for that. In this way, you can react. Perhaps somebody turns off MFA, you're going to get a notification and be able to react and perhaps even prevent where possible. We're looking at a feature that if somebody goes to try to sign up for a new shadow SaaS, we're going to let them know via a pop-up that perhaps they shouldn't do that. A couple of things you want to monitor and manage, right, is unauthorized logins to a SaaS app. Maybe people using a shared login. What happens when one of those shared users leaves the company? How many super admins or top security level assignment do users have? Should they have that capability? That's very powerful capability. Again, we talked about signing up for new unapproved shadow SaaS apps. What's your lifecycle process? What's your request process? Perhaps they're logging into a SaaS app outside of your single sign-on solution. It's a great way to kind of centralize login in one place once you discover and monitor. What's the historical SaaS app security breaches? Perhaps there's, a recent breach of an app. Maybe it'll cause you to not work with that particular app. And ultimately, Secure Score, Microsoft, big deal. All SaaS apps, you should come up with your own security scoring or whatever the app is doing and really monitor it and always try to improve it. And here you see some alerts distribution from the Afire mock-up, looking at security alerts. And this is really what the managed services, again, much like your RMM, monitoring your SaaS security settings, really critical to maintaining that baseline catalog and the security of your clients. License and subscription management, really a managed service that you should all be doing, executing right now, and understanding, what are the SaaS apps, what are the costs and spend, and what's the budget that your client needs to prepare for next year. And ultimately, it's about not selling SaaS and forgetting it. You really want to monitor active users, unassigned licenses, zombies, leavers, and really monitor the spend. Maybe they're, have an E5 license, but they're not using all the features of E5. Maybe you can back them down to an E3. Maybe there's been poor offboarding up until now because you weren't aware of certain SaaS apps, and users are still defined that have left the company. And ultimately, we talked billing reconciliation. That's the ultimate. Are you getting billed for the number of licenses that you're billing your clients? Or have you found a discrepancy and you need to reconcile and maybe turn off some licenses at your client or tell your vendor, maybe get some credit or whatever. But ultimately, reconciling billing, big issue. SaaS renewals, super critical. How many times, even in your own personal life, has SaaS renewed and now you're stuck for a year because you didn't know the renewal was coming up? So understand the contract terms. When's your renewal date? When's that going to happen? Make sure it's automated, right? We talked about SaaS redundancies, multiple CRM and project tools. You can see that. An alert should pop up if another CRM shows up as being signed up for. And get those automated insights and alerts, and ultimately perhaps automate execution of a task like offboarding and onboarding, very critical. So driving adoption as a managed services, again, don't build SaaS and forget it. Monitor SaaS for usage, logins. What are the different features being used? As I mentioned, there might be an opportunity to back down a license. Maybe you'll see users using applications that are available in a greater license of perhaps Office 360 and 365, right? Whether you want to upgrade or downgrade a license, you have to monitor to see that. And really, it's about minimizing churn with webinars. I've seen MSPs building their own LMS, perhaps pointing to vendor resources. But again, don't build SaaS and forget it. At least build up some training and adoption services and generate some revenue while you're at it. Frictionless onboarding. That's a great way to start, right? How does that SaaS app get brought in? How does that user get onboarded? Have you personalized their experience? I certainly remember with Autotask, we came out with our widget dashboard. You can make a dashboard for any type of user, any type of role inside your client. Same thing with Salesforce, same thing with HubSpot. So personalize that experience so they start using it. And track adoption to vendor incentives. If you're looking at adoption, might as well see if your vendors are rewarding you for driving adoption. And I've seen that happen, so be ready for that. And always get those automated insights from your SaaS management platforms and recommendations that help drive ROI. All right, I see I got another SaaS poll here. I want to, one thing, maybe let's see. How many of you are using a SaaS management platform right now? So maybe let's get back, re-engage here, and just want to know: have you taken the move? I know some of you said you were looking to regain control of your SaaS ecosystems employed by your client. How many of you are actually using a SaaS management platform? And definitely got to get some answers here. Apologize for getting you back in, but are you using a SaaS management platform right now to manage your client SaaS ecosystems? And are you using a manual process? Do you have one SaaS management platform that's doing a great job for you? Are you using multiple SaaS management platforms? Maybe you're using the Microsoft Portal, Google Portal, Salesforce Portal, HubSpot, but at least you're doing something across your client base, and it may be difficult, but at least you're engaging with a SaaS management platform. I think that's pretty critical for you to be delivering SaaS management services, and why we're building a fire. So the poll's been out for a minute. So we've got roughly 40%. So if you want to give me one more answer, and I'll close the poll and kind of share the results. And what we're seeing here is that 40% of you using multiple SaaS management tools, 20% are manual, and 40% are not using a SaaS management platform. So, thanks for getting involved, and I think that's typical of what I'm seeing out there, today. So let's talk about selling SaaS management services to your clients, and really it's about that baseline project, I believe, right now for your getting into your client base, and certainly as you're prospecting out there. And I think we've heard it a lot, not only with cybersecurity, now with SaaS. We're a small company, we don't have SaaS management issues. And there you see that Gartner Magic Quadrant quote from before, that you need to centrally manage SaaS lifecycles, or in fact, you're 5 times more susceptible to a cyber incident. Great response from a trusted source. And then other conversation pointers: you can remind your client they're probably spending $7,200 or more annually per employee on SaaS. Perhaps you could see 43% of cyber attacks are aimed at small business, and they are a small business. And with shadow SaaS, there is an increased attack surface. Misconfigurations leave SMBs vulnerable to data breaches and service disruptions. Certainly unauthorized access, ex-employees, really key stat. So a couple of key conversation points there. Don't you already have us covered? I've heard this from many MSPs. Your clients think you're doing it. I believe CompTIA, now GTIA, put out a stat. I think recently over 70% of MSP clients are asking MSPs to do SaaS management. So they're recognizing the need. Maybe they're hearing about it. But ultimately, you can share, hey, I don't have you covered. Just like with cybersecurity, the changing landscape has caused us to take a focus, build a practice, and we're going to cover the SaaS we sell and deploy because we know about it. But we need to come in and do a baseline project and ultimately manage it, because 70% of SaaS spend is by BU, and almost 85% is being brought in by shadow IT and business units, and we have blind spots. And ultimately, a couple of key conversation pointers: hey, you're continually improving your services due to the changing landscape. Market dynamics have drastically shifted to SaaS. There's no lifecycle process in place. Now there is. We need to automate the process of bringing on new SaaS, and you have this greater ability with SaaS management platform and your practice to detect threats, analyze quickly, and respond post-delivery. So a couple of benefits. I mean, we've talked about them all, just trying to highlight them: reduced attack surface and mitigated risks, reduce and control shadow SaaS, implementing that acceptable use policy helps your clients benefit because they will understand that SaaS policy and usage, optimizing spend through right sizing, SaaS licenses and subscriptions, really key risk for your clients that they may not be aware of, and you could bring it to light. giving them an opportunity to improve their budgeting and forecasting, and perhaps even getting you involved. Maybe you can become a reseller of a SaaS application and give them a discount and transfer the contract over to you as a partner. So a lot of capabilities around budgeting and forecasting, streamlining processes through integration and automation, an improved ROI for your clients through SaaS adoption. So again, very, very key benefits that you can talk to your clients about, and specifically even regulatory and framework compliance, and really being audit ready. Every compliance framework has your client needing to be aware of what assets they are using on technology, both hardware, software, and certainly now SaaS. Whether you're in Europe, in the US, it's a pervasive component of regulatory frameworks. So again, a bunch of benefits and an ability for you guys to to implement SaaS management for your clients. So I guess here I'd like to launch a poll, maybe just to understand, are you actually selling SaaS management services to your clients? Really important opportunity for you. And I just want to see if I can get you to quickly give me a response here if you're already selling SaaS management services. I think from previous responses, we have a great idea, and we are getting close to the end of the session. So if I don't get a response, because I see a couple of folks raising their hand here to talking about, oh, I like that. My client takes care of their SaaS. No, but we want to. Appreciate you guys jumping in and responding to the poll. But I'm going to close this poll right now. I'm going to share it really quick to give you an idea. You know, folks have been doing it for a while now. That's great. 20% saying your client takes care of their own SaaS. Be nice for you to regain control of that. And 20% no, but you want to. Fantastic. Thanks for those responses. So again, sell it to your clients first. Very important for you to do it. So let's talk about some next steps. A Fire, again, welcome in the Fire team here, and I really am working real hard with the Fire team, building a great SaaS management platform. Do you want to be involved in our early adopter program, where you're going to get exclusive access to our cutting edge features and tools before release, influence the product we build to make it work for you, get dedicated support from our founder team, marketing opportunities, case studies, press releases, and discounted pricing for the life for your lifetime of using a Fire. And you could either scan the barcode up there, you can email me, len.dicostanzo@afire.ai, to let me know you want to use it, but definitely looking for some early adopters to join the Fire early adopter program and really help us build the best SaaS management platform for MSPs. And I do have to ask just one more polling question, because we are really looking for early adopters, and I'm hoping I've got a couple of you out there willing to join us. We'll reach out to you if you want us to right away. We'll wait 30 days if you're busy. No, not now, but you like what we're doing. You know, maybe you want us to give you a shout when we're ready to go, or no thanks, maybe you're not sure. So hopefully a few of you will respond here or scan that barcode, because we're really looking for a few of you to help us build the best SaaS management platform for MSPs. I'm going to leave you with some next steps in a moment, but definitely I got a couple of respondents coming in. Fantastic. Let's grab a couple of more folks. Right now we've got a couple of early adopters been helping us with our MVP. We're looking for a few more as we build and develop it. So I will close that poll right now and get you guys to the end of our webinar, leaving you with some next steps. First off, we talked about the market opportunity and risk. So go out and understand, what is your market opportunity in your base? What's the risk out there? And then focus and build your SaaS management practice. Start by discovering your client SaaS apps in use and develop your baseline catalog. define your managed services around security, license management, and adoption. Sell those services to your clients, and really just get started on your SaaS management journey today, no matter how you get started. If you're interested in diving a little deeper and building your managed service practice, I've got a great MSP accelerator program where we'll talk about your service catalog, how to expand it, how to price it and bundle it, what kind of staff you need to deliver on some of these services, and how do you market and sell it to your clients. Again, you can email me, let me know however you can. You can book a time on my calendar if you want to talk a fire, if you want to talk about building your managed service practice. But again, a lot of opportunity for you to accelerate your managed service business.